Hello, today is May 30th, 2023. It is week 9, and I will share screen. Okay, so yeah, today we're talking about AI and art. AI and art. Alrighty, so what is AI? Well, so AI is a very broad field, broad topic. Um, Basically, it's artificial intelligence, meaning something created by a computer or machine, things that are not humans, that are not animals, um, that accomplish various things. Again, it's very wide reaching, kind of hard to really um, pin down exactly what AI is. It's very, very broad. Um, so, what is AI used for? So stuff such as search engines, playing chess, recommendations, spe- voice to speech recognition. Um, Pretty much every day we use AI in some form of the other. It's used on the internet all the time, used on your phones all the time. Um, it's been in place for a long time, as you can see with this old photo. Um, but we it's different things to different people, like the Steven Spielberg film AI. That was about a robot boy, right? But we this is obviously not a robot boy, it's a computer playing chess. So it takes on many different forms. However, I'm when we're talking about AI and art, we're narrowing the field down quite a bit. So yeah, we're talking about artificial intelligence art. So it's using artificial intelligence, using text to image models and musical generators, for example, to create an end product that is artistic in some way. Okay. So, and most of what we're talking about and discussing today is based around the ability to use natural language in order to create images. And the images that are output are usually high quality, realistic, or done in a remarkable style that may be reminiscent of great painters or whatever. It is also kind of broad in a sense, and AI is a bit of a misnomer because it's so broad, but let me break it down for you a little bit more. So this is a very, very, very oversimplified version of how this works. Okay, so um, right here we have input images. This is a data set. So what this means is the source material, right? So this is basically the literally billions of images taken from the internet. And that is the data set. That's the information we're using. Okay. Well, I should say the information the AI generative model is using. Okay. And now it's in here, it's in this generative model. Okay. So after, doing some input or whatever, um, typing out a phrase that will output something according to that phrase, here we get generated images. Okay. And so the images that come out will look like basically what you prompt it to be. Um, the math and physics behind this is pretty complicated, but basically, um, the the AI generative model breaks images down and sort of into like little tiny dots, like pixels more or less, and then reconstructs them according to, probability, um, and other weird stuff that I don't understand because I don't understand math or physics at that level. Um, but yeah, it's a very, very complicated process, and the AI generative model chooses what pixel goes where, and basically what creates the image. Um, and then out comes the AI artwork that the person picks. So the artist role within this is is a pre-curation, which is usually an involuntary thing where a lot of the images are created um so or taken for the AI generative model. But the artist tweaks, like puts an input and then they tweak the input, like, okay, these images didn't come out like I like, so I have to type rethink how I'm going to type these words and how I interact with this. And then outcome generated images, usually four at a time. And then you pick from that basically. Okay, again, this is very oversimplified, but this is kind of all you need to know for right now. Okay, so before we proceed, I want to give you my perspective on AI and art as an artist. By but also remember, I'm not making a living through creating art, creating illustrations. I make a living through teaching, and I also do art. So I'm not depending on my livelihood. So yeah, I'm trying to remain as neutral in this position as much as possible, which is impossible because I'm a human. I have opinions. Um, I don't plan on taking advantage of generative AI until I have a strong reason to do so. I think the capabilities are pretty cool, and pretty destructive. And this next point, it's very hot right now. I kind of avoid trends, because then your art will just kind of look like everyone else's, which to me doesn't make sense why you'd want to do that. Um, I think being part of an artist is trying to forge your own way and not copy everyone else. Um, so uh, so I'm trying not to make my art look like everyone else's. That wouldn't make sense. Um, there are things to the right that I enjoy, like This Band Isn't Real is creating fake metal band album covers. And this is one of my favorite ones. It's really funny. Wizard Rat. Um, I don't know. I think there's a lot of value in just having a silly toy to play with, right? Um, Also, I am far from an expert. I've done a lot of research on this, not just the AI imagery, but also Chat GPT. And I still don't feel like I know a lot. There's just a lot to uncover, and there's a lot of jargon I don't understand. So I can only present my particular view on this. Hey, we're going to start off with a pro AI article. So the problem with this pro AI article is it's paywalled. It's a wired feature. So um, you probably can't access it. But what I do have is uh, there's a paywall removing site where I link this to. So it might work, it might not. I don't know. But basically, Kevin Kelly, the author of this article, says a few things that is pro AI. So one thing I absolutely agree with is it's great for non-artists to make something they dreamed of. For example, dreams, right? There's plenty of opportunity for people who don't have the vision to make something Sometimes that's a final artwork. Sometimes that's um, a way to get out a visualization that they couldn't because they can't draw. For example, dreams, like the ability to like show someone what your dream looked like, without having to spend hours of training. I think that can be kind of neat. There's unexpected results, um, because these AI models aren't humans, and they kind of create things based on probabilities and don't have a conception of what good or bad is. So some things may come out. It's only good once you learn how to use the system. So it does take a certain amount of tweaking skill to really get the most out of it. If you just type a 2-word sentence, it might be like wildly different than you would imagine. And that may be a good thing, that may not be a good thing. But the more specific you want to get, the better you have to get at typing in words, aka prompts, in order to get what you want. good for weird things that are impossible to find or don't exist. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of self-explanatory. Again, these don't understand what's good or bad, quote unquote. I mean, not everyone has the same conception of that. So this has a sense of, has a lack of inhibition. So basically, it just spits out whatever. There's no judgment on what it spits out. And sometimes it's really bizarre stuff that you never would have thought of that can really spark your interest and be like, oh, actually, I could go in this direction. For example, uh, probably going to be in more places where there's nothing before. Uh, Kevin Kelly says something like, illustrators aren't going to be replaced because they're going to just use, like, companies are going to be nice and be just use these for places where there could be additional illustrations, not replacing human illustrations, but more are everywhere where it wouldn't exist before. And human artists very likely won't be replaced. Take a little issue with that, which I'll talk about. And here's a image of world's most expensive burger, created with a DALL-E 2, I believe. So there's a prompt book and even sites to sell prompts. So I'm going to go ahead and click this. If you're going to use DALL-E 2, here's an idea of like how to get really good prompts and get out the imagery that you want. So this, for example, shows like, okay, painting of a boy in a red coat on a chair or whatever. These are created again by the AI. No one painted these, but using these words like positive mood, high energy is a lot different than negative mood, low energy, for example. Um, and it gives ideas of like different styles, vibes, punks, etc. Um, and just by typing in a few words, you can create these sort of images, and you can see that they can be quite realistic and interesting. So go back to this. Um, and then there's sites to sell prompts, basically to help you out to get the results that you want or get cool things. So if you're a small artist, your influence is too small. So this, in this point, he's talking about, well, like, um, if my image data is in here, why, like, I don't want people's artwork to look like mine, to style their AI generated images off of my work. So Kevin Kelly argues that um, artists who are smaller, they're not going to get ripped off because they're not as popular, which is technically true, but not a nice way to say that. So if, but there's people like Monet as his example, like a lot of people know Monet and his water lilies, so they might try to do artwork in his style. So basically, um, he's postulating that he's more influential like in the real world than little artists are, which is true because more people know about Monet than someone on your block who's an artist, right? We don't expect artists to credit everyone they're inspired for their artwork. So this is going into the problem of plagiarism, which I'll talk about in a minute. So generally, like, artists don't mention every single influence they have for every artwork they have. That would be kind of crazy. And he's saying that AI art shouldn't do the same, even though they're kind of stealing sometimes, most of the time, I would say. Um, yeah, and there's great uses such as medical and 3D design as well. That would take a lot of time. Coding as well. So there's some really great uses for this. Um, and then the AI creativity is never gonna like be, this last point is AI creativity is never gonna be on the genius of like Monet or whatever, right? So there's a lot of issues with AI. Um, and as I mentioned, I'm trying to remain neutral. There's many great uses of AI. I definitely think that. But there's also problems associated with it because it's easier to talk about how cool it is and easy to see how fun it is. And Part of that's hype built up by tech bros, basically. And it's kind of important to realize the downsides of this. Okay, so um, I'm starting off here with I'm not going to read it all, but here's a thread about AI as class warfare, why it's a problem. It's a thread by a digital artist who makes a living off digital art. So first is corporations will cut costs, aka artist salaries, which I'll go into a little bit more. AI isn't regulated right now, which is true. There's efforts to be doing that, but it's kind of impossible, which I'll talk about more later. Flooded market, I'll talk about that more later, but the interesting point here is just like some artists today, like animators for Disney, for example, the people who are supported by the people with the money, like Disney, those are the people who are going to stand out. Everyone else might just kind of get lost, right? AI tech will likely replace lower and medium income jobs and not higher class jobs, which is kind of interesting and scary. So we're going to talk about tool versus replacement. So AI is as a tool is a means to an end. AI as a replacement is getting rid of the middleman. So an analogy that I'm going to present to you is robots. Okay, so we can see with the cute GIF on the top right, this is a robot, right? Not the cat, obviously, but the cat riding the Roomba is cute. The Roomba itself is a vacuum cleaner. It doesn't really provide an existential threat to humanity. Um, yeah, there's no need for a human to push around the vacuum anymore, but it's still operated by a human in the sense that you have to turn it on. It's a household appliance. It's not really replacing a worker or anyone. It's just that additional item for convenience. On the bottom here is robots as assembly workers. So, um, yeah, cars used to be on the assembly line and put together by humans, but those were replaced by robots in this image. And I'm sure it happens all the time. So, in that sense, there's less jobs for less people. Um, is that a good thing? Sometimes robots are replacing jobs that are extremely hazardous, that would kill people, that would give people cancer. Sometimes it's a cost cutting measure. So it's not always black and white which one it is. Usually it's because of cost cutting measures. But think about that. There's different types of robots. There's different types of AI. They have different functions. Some are more innocuous, everyday things for fun, for toys. Um, some are some of it's meant to like overtake the world in a sense, overtake workers' jobs, et cetera, right? So an example is photography, which I have discussed earlier. So again, when photography was invented in 1839, painting didn't disappear. Okay, so things sort of change where abstraction became more popular. Painting, doing things only painting could do, was more popular, and 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 even then, people still value the high quality paintings that were photorealistic. In fact, today you can definitely say the same. When I talked about abstraction, there are people who are upset about abstraction. They think it takes no skill, and meaning they probably highly value skill to make photorealistic paintings. Okay. Another example was Kodak's Brownie camera, which was the first commercially available portable camera that had 100 shots on it. Um, it didn't put studio photographers out of business, right? People still used studio photography pretty regularly up until maybe 90s, 2000s, around there somewhere. Not so much anymore, right? because selfies are a thing. And so because of that, because this thing was introduced, it doesn't mean the old-fashioned way just ceased to exist completely. Okay, it just meant that it was more accessible to everyday people. There's still amateur photographers who didn't have the training, who didn't have the skill to do quote unquote really good photography. Um, I just you just kind of knew when someone was taking a brownie picture and someone was taking a studio picture. It was obvious, right? But it was, in my opinion, really good in the sense that it made it more accessible. And then skipping further ahead of time, back in the early or late 2000s, early 2010s, I was doing film photography. I was doing a lot of photo manipulation with film. I didn't touch digital at all. And then when things like Hipstamatic, I think, came out, I was like, oh, this is kind of stupid. Like they're just trying to imitate film. Why aren't they? Why isn't digital trying to do its own cool stuff? Uh, and it's a lot easier way to do a lot of filters and such. I've gotten over it since. Um, and then camera phones, they're ubiquitous everywhere. They change the landscape of photography because you don't need to buy film. You don't need to process it in the lab. Take a picture within a fraction of a second, you know exactly what it looks like. You don't have to take your film out in the dark and splash it in chemicals in the dark and then print them out in order to see it. Again, it's just in an instant. So it eliminated the need for film. Of course, people still do that. It's more niche, and especially color photography, it's almost non-existent today. It also got rid of the need for, I have it here, disposable cameras or low-end digital cameras. Your phones are more powerful than early digital cameras, so what's the point of that? Especially when it's harder to share with other people. Um, and I can't argue this either way, but it's possible that some people felt less of the need to hire professional photographers to do their things. Maybe some people did become great photographers because of the camera phone. Maybe they do take really amazing camera phone shots, and so they feel I don't really need to spend money to hire a wedding photographer, you know. Which I'm not a huge fan of unless you're really, really broke and literally can't afford it, then it's a decent alternative. But all in all, there's still professional photographers out there who will do a much better job than amateurs. And again, photography didn't replace painting. Painting is still well and alive. Okay. So yeah, one of the things that a lot of pro AI people say is AI is inspired by art just like humans. The answer is no. So the thing about AI is it must take from existing sources. Basically, it can't generate things out of midair. If there's no source imagery for the AI generative model to pull from, there could be no output. So you need an input for an output, right? So again, like there's no such thing as inspiration. It's just basically mathematical models, probability. Whereas, as it says down here, humans use memories and creativity, right? So also think about the fact that um, humans have a lot of subjectivity towards them. We're not machines. We're not cold, unfeeling calculators and computers and such, right? So think about the concept we talked about, subject position, right? Everyone has their own specific experience of who they are up until this point, and that affects how we do things. So on the right hand side here, here's a painting of the masters. So this, I believe this is a Monet painting. So this is a print of the Monet painting. and this is this person trying to replicate it as close as possible. So why is that not why how is that different than AI? Again, so humans are weird, humans are inexact. You can't get everything exactly as Monet did. Uh, I mean, it might be able to do that in you might be able to do that kind of thing in the digital sense, especially when there's if it's like a 16 by 16 grid you're copying, you can get it exact. But with paint, um, you're not, there's a lot of conditions like the paint quality, the humidity outside, the lighting, the print quality, et cetera, that will affect the painting. And when humans do this, it's more to practice and to get better and to understand composition. It's not about plagiarizing and stealing ideas. It's basically a tribute to the original artists. And that's a really rich history that goes back thousands and thousands of years, right? So, with all that in mind, uh, AI can't do that. Pretty much the pixels of an image of the Mona Lisa is the same as the pixels of an image of a picture of a dog like pissing on the fire hydrant. Like it doesn't know the difference of the history, the context. It just sees the pixels itself. So that's a huge difference between inspiration with art and humans is it doesn't know it can't be inspired. Humans can. We are affected by who we are and what we've seen and what we've experienced in art and in our lifetime. On the left's a funny way to sort of show how this works. So, uh, again, this is a reiteration of how it works. The last slide. So, human art shows the influences. You look at these pictures, you think about things. Maybe you try to like sketch them out or whatever. And then like it inspires you to do this, and then you make something else different. Whereas AI art, which is in some instances stolen art, sometimes not, is swallowed by this guy and shit out as these weird random things. Again, that's an oversimplification, but I thought was too funny to not include. So speaking of plagiarism, Lion, LAION, which is Large Scale Artificial Intelligence Open Network, is a non-profit group. So they obtain and scraped images from the web without consent for research. Note that's in quotes, right? And so that's a completely legal thing for them to do. Is it was legal for them to take a lot of images from the internet for research because they were a nonprofit. However, there's for-profit entities such as Midjourney, I think, and Dolly. I believe they both use Leon. They're for-profit groups, and they use that data set. So basically, they're finding this loophole to legally obtain these images, even though it's stolen artwork. It's data laundering. So a lot of the artwork within this 5 billion plus image data set of Lion has been taken without consent and without the owners knowing. Um, so that's a huge deal because, well, like, what if, how would you feel about your work being included in an image data set without you knowing? Some people might like it, some people might not. So this is the way I would say an interesting way of breaking this down. So think about the way you do Google image searching. You type in a 3D illustration of a cute bird robot. That's you input that. Those are your words, right? And what comes out of here uh, is image results that other people did. And obviously, you wouldn't claim this as your own work. Although I have had students do that. And I hope none of you are doing that because that is not your work. Um, right here is your work. You're typing in the same thing, a 3D illustration of cute bird robot. Yep. And here it says this is not your work. Huh. Interesting, right? So what does that mean? Whether you agree with it or not, these tweets kind of explain this. So they say it's sort of like you're an I have it right here, a producer or curator, right? So the people prompting these images don't do the actual work the AI program does, but they make it possible for them to exist. You can even argue that it's not the AI. Well, it's a combination of the AI's stolen or not stolen images based on consent. Um, Collaborating with the artists who may or may not have consented to their work being done. Like they're the ones doing the work. It's you're just pulling out from this data set, right? Um, I personally don't want to say how I feel about it because I don't know. Because this wouldn't exist without the human input, right? And every single image is unique, by the way. You never get the same results twice. So is it real? Is it really like your art? Is it not? I think that's honestly kind of impossible to say. I don't really feel like I understand this enough to really give a strong opinion, but um, I'm kind of I'm kind of on the side of yeah, it is more of a curator, more of a producer role where you make things happen. Even though like producers on movies, for example, or whatever, like make things happen. They make calls, they get resources, they get people to help out, but they don't actually make the thing themselves. They help make it possible. All right. So to me that I'm leaning a little bit more towards a producer than you're the artist doing this. Again, because these come from work that other people have done and it's probably taken tons and tons of hours of practice and skill developing in order to make this even possible. um, so what's interesting that isn't mentioned in this lecture is that a lot of the good stuff or a lot of the stuff comes out looking good and not like scratchy weird stuff that your 3-year-old niece might do. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but um, there's some plagiarism. Like it favors quote unquote good looking stuff. All right, so let's say to the argument of Kevin Kelly, like let's say the artists don't get replaced by AI. Let's say business people are fair. Is there a downside to this at all? Um, so yeah, of course there is. So the first one is really messed up. I'm actually going to go to the article. So this artist, um, I'm not going to pronounce his name. Um, God. Oh, it's one of these paywalls. No, it's not. So a lot of the problem that he's having is his artwork is inspirational. Um, right. He does a lot of really, really, really cool stuff. But this in this article, he's saying that when people search on Google for his artwork, what comes up is AI images created by that are inspired by his artwork. So basically people will say like, "Ooh, dragon fighting car," in this guy's style. Um, it'll come up in a style because he has a lot of images that are popular and people like the style. So the dragon fighting the car is a will be done in a style, right? And so those are the things that will pop up on Google instead of his actual original work. That's obviously a problem that creates discoverability issues. And for people not really paying attention, you might think that that's the person's um, actual artwork if you don't do research. And you can take this back to Monet, right? What if you try to replicate one of his paintings in AI, and then that shows up in the search results, and it looks so so close to Monet's work that people might not know the difference, and that might become one of his better known pieces over time. And he didn't even make the thing, right? It was a machine. So that's kind of an issue, in my opinion. That's an understatement. Again, some work is taken illegally. Not everything's taken with consent. It's not opt in, it's not opt out. Things were just taken because it was for this nonprofit for quote unquote research, whose data set is being used by for profit companies. So some private medical record photos were taken. No one really wants that. So there's always an argument. Well, don't put that on the internet. Well, I mean, you don't expect sometimes like you don't expect things of yours to pop up, and they do anyways, even if you set them to private. Like not everything's so watertight, and you can't expect people to stop um, doing things like that. Um, you know, like maybe sending them through email, like those emails might be scraped, even though you think the email is secure and private, it might not be as much. So, I mean, that's just a general issue of what you put on the internet. Um, it's never going to be 100% safe, honestly. So you kind of got to watch out for that. But at the same time, some people might need to do that for medical reasons, for example, but they only want to share it with their doctor, let's say because they're sick and they can't come in. But that data gets scraped and taken for this data set. Things like that can happen. Um, Also, this article, which is pretty how it's pretty intense, but basically like using political figures, for example, in non-consensual porn or executions, or being in places they never would go, or making them kiss each other, stuff like that. Like there's a lot of, we all know about the Pope with the giant white puffy coat. Like a lot of things like that can happen, right? Where it looks so realistic that, oh, did he really do that? Are they really signing this treaty? And that gets thrown out into the whole internet, and things might be self-manifesting. um Something that it does force is artists to do something different or better. Again, I talked about this, like I personally wouldn't want to make anything that looks like AI art, because it's everywhere. I want to do things my own way, but sometimes there's people who, or I mean, like that guy whose artwork got plagiarized, he does make things in his style because he's him, right? And so he can't get away from that. So like maybe you'll have to do something different now, right? Which kind of sucks, especially since that was probably his bread and butter, doing like Magic the Gathering or D&D type stuff. Um, who knows? It's a really weird thing. The sea of shit, which is a huge issue. Basically, there's going to be so many good looking images that it's going to be hard to find actually good, meaningful stuff, as opposed to just imitations of them, or just things people were farting around on that happen to look cool. So it's the same thing with like digital photography, Instagram. There's just so much stuff out there that it's impossible to watch it all or experience it all. So you kind of need for that to be curated. There's also this point, is that it will devalue, some people will devalue hardworking artists just because it can be done with AI. They don't really value the effort, time, money, energy, blood, sweat, tears, etc., that go into art, right? So that's always a problem. We'll get into that later. However, there again, this is a Twitter thread. It's an opinion, but this is Iron Spike's opinion. Um, so this is the first message. I don't believe AI will be as good as a decent artist, but I do believe capitalism won't care. This is the reply, quote, retweet to be more specific. Capitalism definitely won't know, but the thing I find being discounted in a lot of these conversations is value. Things that are easy to make, things anyone can do, aren't valuable. Value is a driver of worth. Um, algorithmic generated art will crash its own value just existing. Um, so this is here's an example of how this might work. Of an editor, if an editor, portfolio reviewer, school admissions officer gets 100 portfolios and 95 are digital smears, meaning AI art. In some ways, this problem will fix itself. Basically, there's a lot of stuff that will look good, but they'll look similar. You can tell right away they're AI art, that they're not created by hand, and that will kind of fix itself in a way. Basic and going down here, this is the entire thread, but going down here, it'll be a load of cheap shit with little to no value that people will eventually recognize as cheap shit on site. So yeah, that's an optimistic view of um, people recognizing, oh, this is actually good stuff that an artist made by hand as opposed to AI created stuff. Not saying that AI created stuff can't be good, but that humans will value value basically. It's a difference between like maybe like a handmade tool rather than a mass produced tool. Some people just won't care, they just want to get the job done, right? But other people, like, they really want to support their local artisan, or they really want the best thing, right? Those are the people who will be supporting these artists. But um I guess it can depend more on the expertise or interest in the field, rather than like just an easier breakdown. But I think that's what it really comes down to is people who are invested in art, who love art, who really want to see um, cool, innovative, new stuff. Um, they will be the ones who care, and people who are just want the bare minimum, the cheap people trying to cut profits, etc. Those are the people who won't care. And this is the same thing, basically, that there's a story where this guy used AI art in his article, where there wouldn't be artwork otherwise, just stock photography. He didn't undercut any artists whatsoever. Um, and then a lot of people got mad at that. And then he's like, yeah, that was a bad decision in hindsight, even though, because like now it seemed like I'm really pro AI replacing artists, but he says technology is increasingly deployed to make gig jobs and to make billionaires richer, and so much of it doesn't seem to benefit the public good enough. AI art is part of that. It to developers and technically minded people, it's this cool thing, but to illustrators, it's very upsetting because it feels like you've eliminated the need to hire an illustrator. Um, so again, like, some people care about the quote unquote so heart and soul of art, and those people will always exist, but sometimes they won't. Okay, and Ted Chiang, so he's an amazing writer. He wrote The Story of Your Life, which is what the movie Arrival was based on. Um, one of the best science fiction writers probably the best that I've ever read. So he wrote a little bit on AI and labor. Um, it's paywalled, this article. I'd recommend reading the whole thing. Here's an anti-paywall link, but if that doesn't work, I put it in docs so you can read it. Um, so he says AI is like a consulting firm. It is the middleman that does the thing to allow an entity to shift accountability to someone else. Basically, like, this is a way to undercut people and saying, "Oh, it's AI." It's like, we're using this, and we're not taking away from artists. We're like using artwork, and we're advancing um, our illustrations and stuff that way, et cetera, et cetera. Um, Also, some AI developers are trying to be accelerationists. Accelerationism is a school of thought where basically you just want everything to become better and quicker and everything. Forget the consequences, right? Because at some point, everything will crash, and then that'll force change to start. So an example he gave is Slavoj Žižek, who is a philosopher who is um, who is anti-Trump, but he said basically electing Trump would be a good thing for people who are opposed to him, because because that's going to force people to change. That's going to force people to raise their voices. Stuff like that did happen, um, and that will force things to change so much that um, things will eventually be good for the people who are opposed to Trump, right? But as we saw, that's not exactly what happened. A lot of crazy shit happened under Trump. Um, Obviously, I'm not a fan of the way he did things or the people he empowered, who were against um, diversity and white nationalism, which obviously sucks. Um, but yeah, like the problem with that is like it's gonna harm those people in the meantime. You know, electing Trump was hurting trans people, people of color, especially black people, underprivileged people, et cetera, et cetera. Like that did happen. So yeah, things like the 2020 demonstrations did happen. However, a lot of people suffered in order to get there. And guess what? Not everything is solved there, right? That's a whole nother rabbit hole. But the same thing with illustration. It's like, yeah, we can just like use this AI and like the illustrators will suffer for now, but everything will be better in the end. But how long is that end? That's not guaranteed whatsoever, you know? So like making things move as fast as possible um, isn't a great solution. Accelerationism, because it hurts a lot of people, and it's better to like collaborate and think together on how to fix these things instead of just running into a wall and hoping things work out in the end, right? It's nice to think about maybe that could work, but again, a lot of people are hurt by accelerationism in all realms. Okay. So he talks about the Luddites, which who smashed machinery to take back handmade stuff. So they weren't anti-labor; they're about economic justice, and that's sort of what Ted Chiang is aiming for: economic justice. He's not anti-AI. He's more about, well, what's going to make sense for laborers, for people who do this kind of work. How are we going to support them and not just throw them in the trash because of the shiny new toy called AI generative artwork and text and stuff like that. Um, so so there's always this false promise of like this is what the future is going to be like, because you can't promise the future. You can promise trying to get there, but when tech bros are like, this is going to happen, this is the best thing, um, it doesn't always work, as we've seen with like what's it called, Decentraland, which is a video about the metaverse, how it's sucking bad. It's going to be great, but it hasn't come yet, so your promises are hollow. um so yeah, and what I like about this article, it refers to the Sorcerer's Apprentice, which some of you might know from Fantasia, where Mickey Mouse creates a living broom, a ton of living brooms out of one broom in order to get his work done faster, but obviously he ends up in trouble. The metaphor goes on and on as far as that's concerned, but this is definitely worth reading. It's a good article. So the point of that is like, yeah, AI do can replace labor, but it might not be good. It might need to be steered in a better direction. It might take us to places that are dangerous and bad. um, it's a Pandora's box. All right, so let's talk about the time an AI piece won first place in an art contest. So the context of this is, as it says here, Colorado State Fair, first place. Um, this is created with AI. So the category for this was digital art slash digitally manipulated photography. Okay, which is kind of a problem in itself because they're completely different things. Um, it notes Midjourney on the label. So this artist, I think it says right here via Midjourney. So the artist did make note of it, that that's where it came from, that this person collaborated with it. So the judges didn't understand this at first. Some did, some didn't know what Midjourney was, and then they found out what it was. And then they said they'd still give it a first place regardless. So he used the human elements of choosing the best images. So he prompted over 100 images and he chose the best one. He used Photoshop to clean up some details and he used some upscaling software. So it did take a fair amount of work, according to him. Um, so so that happened, and he wants to do even more of this kind of stuff. He also says this isn't going to stop. Art is dead, dude. It's over. AI won. Humans lost, which is an asshole thing to say, and I'm not ashamed of saying that. So of course, digital artists are upset about this because, well, like he didn't put the same amount of effort into this because yeah, someone could have painted this in 10 hours. Yeah, he could have done this over the course of 10 hours, right? In theory, let's say. However, that ignores the hundreds of hours an artist would have put in order to get to that level to make that kind of stuff. So a lot of this is a shortcut in order to get to somewhere where someone doesn't have the skill set to do by hand. Is that fair to artists? Are artists whiny for this? Um, should there be a separate category for AI art? This brought a lot of questions to a lot of artists and kind of philosophically, like, should this person be in the contest at all? Should they be in a different category? Like, what is art? Like, yeah, he AI generated it, but he did a lot of tweaking to it. Like, you could do that with a photograph, right? You could do that with an image. So like, why wouldn't this count? So there's a lot of weird existential questions of like, what is art? Is this art? Is he an artist? Is he a curator or a producer? A lot of debate went around this. I personally think there should be a different category for AI art. That's just my take on it. So this happened today. One of Adobe's, like, I don't know if it's a representative. I don't know if they work for Adobe or whatever, but definitely feels like it's sponsored by Adobe. But ever wonder what the rest of the Mona Lisa looks like? Got Adobe Firefly to help fill out the background for me with the power of AI. So here's the original image of Mona Lisa, digitized, cleaned up, of course. And then this person used AI to expand the bounds, like, oh, this is what the rest of the Mona Lisa looks like. Um, which is, since you've been a part of class, you might know how ridiculous that is. Um, the replies and quote retweets are definitely worth reading. But everyone's basically slamming this because, like, you're taking this classical piece and trying to, like, say, here's the rest of it, when that's literally the only thing that exists. Some people might argue, like, oh, it's just a fun exercise. It could be, but this is sort of um what I'm talking about when I mentioned, like, AI hype. It's like, look at this cool stuff it can do. Like, this doesn't make the painting better. It changes the whole thing, right? She's a floating ghost woman now. She's not this mysterious woman in this background. It just changes the context of everything, and it's not a great piece because it doesn't have that same meaning. It's just, hey, look at this technology and what I can do. So if you're looking at it as like a toy, sure, it's I think it's pretty cool to do these kind of thought exercises, like, look what this technology can do, but at the same time, it's rough for many, many reasons. And yeah, I definitely recommend checking out all of the well m- checking out, like, a bunch of the replies and quote retweets. They're so good. um But what's funny is that this is for Adobe Firefly, which is AI technology within Photoshop and maybe Illustrator. But basically, what's funny about Adobe is they're actually ethical about their AI generated, the input, the training data set. So they take stuff from the stock photo library that they own, that artists have consented to give their artwork to. So in a weird way, as problematic as Adobe is, especially with subscription cancellations, for example, um, a lot of stuff about Adobe that's problematic, but their AI program is actually like ethical. Sure, you can create stupid shit like this. Um, but the fact that it's done with consent is like, oh, they actually did something good. The problem with this is the data set isn't as good, isn't as expansive, so it's not going to provide the results of the 5 billion stolen images that Lion shares, but at least you know it's not, it's all consensual. Here's a bad use for AI propaganda. So this woman hugging the soldier, or women hugging soldiers, um, trying to show like protesters and cops coming together. Um, deep fakes basically, and oh, this person has 6 hands or 6 fingers. Whoops, guess it's not real. Physiognomy, which is basically like, yeah, as it says here, a forensic sketch AI artist. Oh, look, this person's brown, of course. Um, like using data set, knowing very well that there's a disproportionate amount of brown people in prison who have had their portraits taken for mugshots and stuff like that. Of course, there's problems with that. Need I say more? And then there's jerks like this who say like, "Oh, I could save so much money by not hiring real models or artists. I could just do this quickly." Um, and same tired argument. Didn't artists learn from other artists and get inspired? I'm on the AI side, so people siding siding with something that doesn't have any feelings, emotions over their fellow human beings. I find that absolutely disgusting, and heck those people. um yeah, I shouldn't have to explain why this is awful. Oh yeah, and just to clear this up, designers, like graphic designers, face this problem all the time, like, oh, I could do it easier for cheaper, and then you see like really crappy design out in the wild because people didn't put the money and invest in people who know what they're doing that might make their company look better. So why should non-AI artists such as me care? You can ignore it all you want, but it's been growing, it's gonna grow bigger, it's not gonna stop anytime soon. Um, will AI art make artists obsolete? Obviously, that's very, very important topic right now. Some artists will lose their jobs. Maybe you can use it in your workflow. Uh, I think it's, I think a good use that's been said is like, oh, inspiration for something different that you would have thought of. Um, but using it outright, you don't have to do that. You could just use it as a in between step, right? Again, concerns about copyright. So if you upload anything to the internet, it's probably fair game to be used somewhere. The likelihood of your like one of your thirst trap photo pics might be kind of extremely small, but it might show up somewhere, but in a weird form, right? So like, yeah, you might have images you don't want other people to see, but if it's done through AI, traces of it might be there. It won't be recognizable to anyone, but it might be there, might make you uncomfortable. Again, like that example of that artist who's the Google results show up more for the AI artwork rather than his original artwork. You never know what's going to happen, or maybe it's something you're like, oh yeah, I'm glad this showed up, so in any case, you should be concerned in like whether you're going to be in this data set or not. Um, is there ethical generative AI? Yes, of course there is. I talked about Adobe. I don't know the specifics behind it, but it sounds good, at least to me. So generative AI music, as sketchy as it is ethical because um, the music industry is huge, much bigger than the digital art industry, for example. And so people will sue the pants off each other, especially if they're Marvin Gaye's family, apparently. So yeah, there with sampling and hip hop, that's not like Danny Brown's a good example. His album Atrocity Exhibition used hundreds of samples, um, but but he had to license them all. Um, and because of that, like he literally went into debt because of that album. So the music industry is really quote unquote good with ensuring copyrights, whether that's justified or not. Personally, I think samples should be able to use it, creates new awesome works. See the boom bap era of rap, early 90s. Um, yeah, so public domain and Creative Commons works are ethical to use. Public domain means anyone can use these images for any reason whatsoever. They can even make, you, you probably shouldn't claim they're yours, but you can use those in like video games or music videos or whatever and make money from that. Creative Commons are other ways of copywriting, like for example, yeah, you can use this in your thing, and you can sell that thing that you're using my work in, but you have to credit me, or you don't, or like any combination of that. Like you don't need to credit me, or you can use this, but you can't sell your work. But you're getting full permission. You're getting permission from the author to do whatever the Creative Commons says to do. Artists who opt in to use their work for training, commission artists, AI companies who commission artists to do it, and in-house creators. So this is Holly Hearn. Oh, we're a little bit over time. That's fine. Just stick around a little bit. So Holly Herndon has been working with AI generated music for a while. She has this program called Holly Plus, which is basically she uploads her voice samples for anyone to use um, for for commercial purposes. I think there is a licensing fee, but she's like, you can make um, music using my voice, generative voice, which is pretty interesting. So, not a fan that she does NFTs, but she's exploring the space. That's kind of weird and interesting right now. So, in a way, I support her, but I still don't like NFTs. There's this article, Resist the Urge to Be Impressed. So this is more talking about Chat GPT, the text rather than image, but it's still relevant. So yeah, a big part of this is like, yeah, this is cool stuff, but we're in the Wild West right now and not necessarily in a good way because of those issues of consent, um, and copyright and who does this belong to or whatever. But another thing about this is on the right, just because the text seems coherent doesn't mean the model behind it has understood anything or is trustworthy. Basically, like this is reiterating that the computer is unfeeling. So when people get excited by Chat GPT and how, oh my God, it's alive. No, it's not. It's basic. It's literally probability and statistics of what word might come after the other. It has nothing to do with emotion or feeling. It's literally a cold, uncaring program that is just doing mathematical formulas that seem impressive. Same thing with the imagery that comes out with this. So people are like, wow, I can't believe they're doing this like really cool photography. Well, it's just pixels arranged in a certain way, that's impressive, but also recognize that it's, again, it's a machine. It's not a human being. It doesn't have feelings. It doesn't understand anything. There's no meaning behind it. It's just being told what to do, and it does it without question. um, so when it comes to AI, it's mostly the non-artists that are making this suck. Mostly business people who want to cut corners to maximize profit and like screw over workers, um, and thus creating a larger gap between higher class and lower class, limiting the middle class, the creative industry, which is the middle class, um, and lower class, of course. But yeah, that's a huge issue, is the business people who have nothing to do with art. The tech bros who don't understand consequences, move fast, break things. There's been plenty of stories about um, new technology like invading privacy or like finding data it wasn't supposed to find, and so the adage of basically the Silicon Valley industry is like, we just got to do things and we can't ask for permission because everything will take too much time, too many legal things. Let's just do this and see what happens after that. Basically, accelerationism, like I talked again. Like things are going to happen like that, and that there's people who are going to be um, victims of that, which sucks. Um, People who don't understand and appreciate art in the process. I think these are the same people who also are like, I don't like abstract art, um, or don't bother to appreciate it. There's people who don't like it who are like, I appreciate it, but I still don't like it. I'm talking about people who think artists are lazy. They're just doing things for fun, and like, why are artists getting paid? They're just having fun the whole time. They should work a real job. Like those kind of jerks, basically. So none of you in this class are like that because you're in art appreciation. You're in understanding art class. Um, so yeah, it's more of the people who are like don't care, right? Which is sad to think about. Artists who are giving up the fight are part of the problem too. So if you're not actively like trying to keep your rights and consent, if you're just like whatever and giving it away, that's part of the problem of like letting these corporations, these people with money, um, these these other non-artists type people to sort of take advantage of artists. So don't do that. So support artists. Remember that. I love this comic so much. There's this joke for Patreon for creators within the community that you're basically passing the same $10 bill back and forth between each other like all the time. Um, Kind of the same thing, but it's kind of funny. So here's a video I'm obviously not going to show. I think it's like 18 minutes or something. Human artist versus Dolly. Really, really cool video. Okay. Have I been trained? So this is an image I drew for an event a few months ago. Pardon me. So this is a website where you can upload the image, and it shows you images in that are in the data training set. So I upload this within like um, a few hours of making this image, and this is the closest thing that pops up. So what's funny is that you don't really see images of like this kind of sketchy, really cartoony quality to pop up when you're doing like Midjourney, for example. So there's probably is a huge bias towards quote unquote better looking art, more realistic. Well, not realistic, but more like what people think as good art. That pops up more in Midjourney than sketches like this, right? But that's because I'm inputting an image rather than inputting text. And so again, those AI image generator models, they tend to pick from, I guess, more well liked or more popular artists. No one knows exactly how it works, but that's how it works because I don't know. That didn't make any sense. Anyways, so for artists, here's a way to watermark your stuff. Um, Here's a really nice thread if this bums you out. So I'm just going to say the points real quick. There are many people, not just you, and we feel the same way. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Does not exceed human capacity for biases, creativity, communication with clients. Plenty of people are always going to be interested in human created art. Speaking up does matter, and be open-minded, read arguments from the other side or differing views from your side. So basically, it's easy to get down about this, especially if you're an artist. Um, but there's ways to counteract that with these sort of things. Like just think about it, just continue doing what you're doing, and hopefully your passion will come through. And the rest of the slide, oh, here's a comic that kind of summarizes what I talked about. There's some differences that I don't talk about, some things that I talk about that are not in here, but it's a pretty long comic, but it's pretty cool. And it's obviously very critical of AI. Yeah, so again, the rest of these slides is where I took information from. I took a lot of information from articles. Those are all linked. Oops. But yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay, so that's like just a few videos. All right. Stop. All right, so yeah, I'm gonna stop sharing screen. So that's pretty much it. There's a lot of stuff that I couldn't talk about because of time. A lot of information out there that I don't know because I can't read everything. But hopefully this was helpful and informative. Yeah, and see you on Discord. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.